Welcome yet again to episode number 6 of Can You Believe It? We believe all truth is God's truth, whether the truth is found in social sciences and mathematics, in physics or chemistry. And it is our responsibility as scholars to search everywhere matter and life exist, to find that which is truth and to share it, analyze it, and share it with all creatures, big and small, on God's green earth. Again, how did we get here? We've been trying to unearth racism and tribalism by taking a look at the historical development of human culture as we know it. Last week, we introduced a few names that go back to the 14th century. We mentioned of the academic teachings of Richard Popkin and his pre-Adamite and degenerate theories. Then we referenced a scholar that is well known, a scholar that many people like to quote. Many of my friends like to quote John Locke, a philosopher and a writer of the Constitution of the States of the Carolinas. John Locke accepted the biblical account of creation as found in Genesis, but he rejected that the native Indians could hold rights to land ownership because they resisted European colonization and civilization. And therefore, in 1690, Locke justified the mistreatment of non-whites because of personal failures, or should I just call them irreconcilable differences? Then came Charles Louis de Secondat. Charles Louis de Secondat from France with his climate theory in 1748. Secondat believed that climate and geography affected people's temperaments and behavior and customs. Therefore, people behaved the way they behaved because of the climate they found themselves in. He said climate was a factor that determined who we are and how we reason. And in 1735, Carl Linnaeus, who is known as the founder of modern biology, came up with the classification of humans. Carl Linnaeus coined the word Homo sapiens that we use today. We classify the humans today as being Homo sapiens sapiens. That was from Carl Linnaeus in 1735. Linnaeus argued that humans were just the same as monkeys and chimpanzees, and that climate also affected the human condition. A theory of his contemporary as well by the name of Charles de Secondat, as we've seen, and another scholar by the name of Montesquieu. All right, these are French philosophers who are trying to establish an identity by then and support the Spanish expansion or Spanish greed for inquisition of land in the New World. Then came another contemporary of Linnaeus by the name of George Louis Conte de Buffon. This was a wealthy and connected friend to King Louis XVI. De Buffon argued in the existence of a superhuman race who lived between the 40 and 50-degree longitudes. De Buffon argued that these were the real superhumans because they lived in the right climatic zones. The drive is connected to the environment, of course. So if you lived in Georgia or Ukraine, Turkey, Hungary, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, and France, and Spain, and other countries found in between these two longitudes, you were a superhuman race. That was Louis de Buffon in the 1700s. I think he forgot to mention that we don't choose where we are born, right? We just kind of find ourselves there. So what can you say? Then came Johann Friedrich Blumenbach in 1775. Now, the years may go back and forth here, but that's just the history we got to look into here. So Blumenbach came up with his human racial classification of people. Blumenbach argued that humans were classified as Caucasians, or he classified humans as Caucasians, Mongoloids, the Ethiopians, or the blacks, the Americans, and the Malayans. Blumenbach argued that the Caucasian tribes are the original imago Dei, the original image of God in them. They were the perfect humans, and everyone else were degenerates of the Caucasians. Sounds like a good theory to kind of justify whatever you want to justify. So this was the academics, the science, the biology, the zoologists' study or science of the day. That was how good the science was. It wasn't better than that. Another scholar and a zoologist by the name of George Cuvier, or Judge Cuvier, born in 1700, maintained that the Mongolian race in particular remained stationary with regard to civilization, while the black race, the Ethiopians, had never progressed beyond utter barbarianism. In fact, some of the early colonizers believed that the African species in particular were pre-Adamites. They were degenerates and subhuman people. This statement can be supported by other scholars, by the way, by the name of like Robert Wald Sussman. In 2014, he writes his book on the myth of race, and that statement can be found in page 13 of his book. He argued that the African natives were regarded as non-moral and incapable of having abstract ideas and incapable of running the African world. Another scholar by the name of Greenfield and Drugers, writing in 2001, supports that. Professor Ali Mazrui, a great scholar from the African continent. Another guy by the name of Mugambi, Kinyoi Mugambi, an African scholar. Robert Sussman, again, good scholars would agree with these things I'm talking about here. So Africans, according to these scholars here, they argue that Africans, not in particular, but I'm looking at the teachings of George Cuvier back in the 1700s, classifying Africans as Adamites and degenerates. They are classifying Africans as being incapable of making sound moral and ethical judgments. Now, here's the other heartbreaker. Sorry for my good theologians and good philosophers. I have good arguments when you talk about these guys. David Hume, born in 1711 through 1776, a time when this, biology and zoologist theories are coming out. David Hume, a renowned Scottish philosopher, in his book, Treatise of Human Nature, written in 39 through 1740. I think that's when he writes the book. This is what David Hume writes, and I quote him. I'm apt to suspect the negro. In general, all the other species of men to be naturally inferior to the whites. There was never a civilization of any other complexion than white, nor any individual eminent either in action or speculation, and no ingenious manufacturers among them, no arts, no sciences. End of quote. That is a direct quote from David Hume. And this is quoted by Popkin, who's writing in 1974. Sussman, again in his book of 2014, page 26, if you want to be specific, quotes David Hume as having said this. I'm sorry for my African people. I'm not. The agenda here is just to expose where we've come from and what factors have contributed to where we are today. Again, the question you're trying to answer is, how did we get here? Well, Hume's approach to African intellectualism and morality undermined the African's ability and potential completely. His approach to human sociology eliminated the moral and ethical participation of the African people in their very own affairs. I'm sorry to break your heart today, but also let's consider another philosopher that kind of right. If you want to kind of look a little bit at uh, this kind of stuff, I'm going to be releasing soon here my dissertation. Kind of covers a little bit with some of these things I'm talking about. But again, I'm sorry to break your heart, but also Immanuel Kant followed Hume's footsteps by embracing similar demeaning ideas into a whole system of philosophical thought. Kant is acknowledged as one of the most influential philosophers of all time especially during the Enlightenment period, and is still widely thought of as one of the most critical moral theorists of modern times, and the father of current day concepts of race and the origin of scientific racism and eugenics. Again, you can you can really kind of look for more of this evidence from scholars like Kant, writing in 1950, Ezi, 1995, Guyer, Guyer, writing in 1998, Jablonski, writing in 2006, Mills, writing in 1977, Neugebauer, writing in 1990, and Van de Piet, writing in 1971. So Kant's anthropology argued that Africans were lesser than whites based on skin pigmentation, and thus Africans were deemed incapable of making sound ethical and moral decisions. Again, Sussman writes this in his book, The Myth of Race, written in 2014, and I think that's found in page 26 through page 27. So, although Kant was a champion of civil rights and the equality of all men, kudos to him, Kant believed that these rights were only for humans who could educate themselves and those with free will. This excluded the pre-Adamites and the degenerates. And this, again, were the Native Americans or the Native Indians, the Ethiopian tribes, or the Africans, and the Mongoloid people. That's supported by Sussman in 2014, page 28. According to Kant, full personhood was dependent on one's race. Eze writes that in 1995. The black person, therefore, was denied the status of full humanity, since complete humanity accrued only to white people. According to Kant, non-whites were relegated to a lower rank on the moral ladder, and were sub-persons of considerably less value than whites because they were non-moral agents. Mills writes in 1997, so does Kleingeld in 2007. Furthermore, non-moral agents lacked moral worth and became objects to be used as a means to the end by others. So Africans were deemed as irrational animals, therefore superior moral agents could master and rule them at will. So Immanuel Kant's theory of race and origins seem to correspond to human intellectual ability and the limitation as the nature of the white race guaranteed its rational and moral order. Even at the very best, I want to say that Kant argued that non-whites could not rationalize or realize reason and act with rational moral perfectibility, even after you have educated them, as Robert Sussman argues in, again, page 28 of his book, released in 2014. Now, to add pain to the injury, sad news today, Kant invented the typical color-coded race theory of Europe, Asia, and the Native Americas, in which he argued that human races were differentiated by their degree of innate talent. This is Kant writing in 1798, direct quote from Kant. And therefore, according to Kant, the nature of the white race guaranteed its rational and moral order as being in the highest position of all creatures. See how education has gotten us where we are. Books and just having a barrel of ink to control the way people think. And I think the media is doing the same thing today. Sometimes, if you don't cross-check your data, you find that you are believing in one worldview instead of having a kind of a balanced perspective to life. Well, Immanuel Kant believed that skin color was the evidence of unchangeable moral and ethical quality and the ultimate measure of what it meant to have free will. So Kant argued that Black people could not realize the capacity to reason and create rational, moral, and ethical thought with perfectibility. Sussman writes in 2014, see how fake science, unsubstantiated data, history, myth, greed for land and expansion for colonization and philosophy and history was propagated to oppress some people to this very day. Kant argued that, I quote, the idle African natives, as he described them, this is Immanuel Kant, not another Kant, could only be educated as servants to follow orders and to keep in order to severe punishment and beating them with split bamboo canes. Direct quote again from Ezzy, writing in 1995, and Neugebauer, writing in 1990. This is not personal opinion, but educated and substantiated historical data. So the Kantian paradigm, therefore, explains why the colonialist or may explain why the colonialists and the first missionaries to the African continent ignored African religious perceptions of God and their moral and ethical values, and why they judged traditional African practices, African social structures, and African culture and customs as primitive. That's supported by Ezenweke and Kanu, writing in 2012, Mazurui, writing in 2002, Mogambi, writing in 2002, John Beatty, that African scholar, writing in 1986, and also Sussman, writing in 2014. So this is just not Joseph's opinions, but other scholars would agree with me on this. And if you want to learn more of this, find my dissertation, which will probably be pretty soon out there. And you can see the arguments from all the different scholars. Rephrasing David Hume directly, Kant stated in 1764 that, again another direct quote, the Negroes of Africa have by nature no feelings that rises above the trifling. End of quote. So David Hume challenged anyone to cite a single example where a Negro or Black person had shown notable talent. He asserted that hundreds of thousands of Blacks had been transported and enslaved elsewhere in the New World from their native countries and set free, and still none was ever found to present anything significant in the areas of art or science or other praiseworthy qualities. This is the background of racism as we see it today. It roots back to history, to philosophy, to biology, to ethics, to zoologists, to any kind of an argument there. It is deep and heartbreaking. My job as a scholar of over 35 years in academic classrooms in America is to dig deep and to understand the issues. I keep the emotions and the feelings out and report the matters as they are. I grew up in Kenya anyways and didn't know anything about racism until I moved out in the Americas in the 1990s. So we can argue that Bloomberg hierarchical model of human races from 1775 played a major factor in the creation of the modern racial paradigm that will influence the rest of the 17th, the 18th, and the 19th centuries. Bloomberg his was a shift from blaming geographical conditions to this new hierarchical ordering of human diversity, and therefore making a fatal transition in the history of Western science. And we shall see during the next episode that for the next 2 centuries, again, the 17th, 18th century, those who scholars and scientists and biologists and zoologists and others will attempt to classify humans using biological variations will inevitably be building on the scheme proposed by Bloomberg back in 1775. We shall consider next a biologist by the name of Baptiste Lamarck. Oh, this is going to be interesting. Let's get into the biology now and get into the medicine. All right. This is, again, a biologist by the name of Baptiste Lamarck in 1778. And the French philosopher, listen to this, by the name of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. We're going to look into those guys and see how they influence racism as we know it today. Again, it gets deeper, man. Don't miss the next episode. Can you believe it? Subscribe so you can be able to get more details in understanding what the issues are and have intellectual conversations with your buddies, and we're just kind of knowing where these issues come from. I think it's important. This has been Can You Believe It? We believe that all truth is God's truth, whether the truth is found in social sciences and mathematics, in physics or chemistry. And it is our responsibility as scholars to search everywhere matter and life exist, to find that truth, find that which is truthful wherever it may be found, analyze it, scoop it from the bottom of the ocean, bring that fine sand to the atmosphere, bring it out to the top, analyze it, and after we've analyzed it, share it with all creatures, big and small, on God's green earth. Again, don't forget to subscribe to Can You Believe It? Talk to you next time. Thank you.